Hi, welcome back to a series of videos on firearm basics for self-defense. This video we're going to be talking about which actual firearm you should buy. And as you can see, we've got a few that we're going to talk about. But first, if you haven't seen the previous videos, please go watch those. Especially the first video where we talk about safety and go over how to safely handle and carry a firearm without accidentally shooting yourself or someone you love. That's the most important video in the series. Please, if you haven't gone and watch that first. All the rest of the videos are valuable in the series, including this one, but please watch that. That is by far the most important video in the series. So let's start talking about guns. Now, I mentioned this whole video series was prompted by a buddy of mine who said, hey, I need to get a gun to protect myself. What should I get? Most people's first question, if you're going to get a firearm, is which one should I buy? Honestly, everything else in this, they're talking about safety and how to load and manipulate them. It's all important stuff. Please watch those videos, but we'll finally talk about what gun to buy. Now, as I kind of mentioned with holsters, the gun is useless if you don't have it with you. Odds are in your life you will never actually need to use a firearm. And they're fun to shoot, don't get me wrong, they're fun to go to the range. And if you need to use that firearm though, you need it right now. So you need to have a gun that you can have with you. So when you need it, you have it. If you get it doesn't matter if you have the fanciest whiz-bang 1911 with an extended 45 caliber magazine and the fancy magwell and fancy sights and lasers and all that, if you don't have it with you. So what I would recommend, there's a lot of companies that make good polymer pistols. Glock is kind of the gold standard. Smith & Wesson makes good pistols. There's Smith & Wesson. I actually really like the Smith & Wesson pistols. Problem is they're not as accurate, at least for me, as Glocks. That pistol I've spent a lot of years, that was my competition pistol for several years. That has more rounds through it than most people will ever fire in their entire life. Because I used to compete with pistols. But what I just found is when I had the option of getting access to Glocks, when I moved to a state where it was legal to get a Glock instead of a Smith & Wesson, I found that a Glock is a much bulkier, blockier, yes, I'm using airsoft pistols as much as possible for demonstration purposes. It's just much blockier. Like if you look at the base, this is a much more rounded, fits your hand naturally, where the Glock is much more square and blocky. But I just shot the Glocks better. A Glock has all of the sex appeal of a 1980 Toyota Corolla. On the other hand, just like a 1980 Toyota Corolla, it will run. As long as you take care of it, do your oil changes and everything else, it'll just work fine. You know, get you from point A to point B, no problem. Get a bullet from point A to point B, no problem. So I would generally recommend Glocks. SIG also makes some polymer frame pistols. Maybe that'll work better for you. Ruger makes several, Smith & Wesson makes several. Those are pretty much the brands I would recommend, but Glock. Now, what model of Glock becomes a question. What most people will generally recommend, grab one here, use the airsoft one, is the Glock 19. Now, personally, I would not recommend this, but I'm a small guy. I'm 5'4", and like, yes, this will fit great in my hand, but when it comes to carrying it every day, it's thick, it's long, it's, this grip sticks out. I can't put this in my pocket, and if I put it on inside the waistband, this will like stick out on the back of my clothes. It's a comfortable gun to shoot, like shooting the Glock 19, but it's just too big for me. If that was my only gun, I'd probably leave it at home most of the time because it's just uncomfortable to carry. And it doesn't matter, you put it in a fancy holster. I talked about holsters in a previous video. It's still just uncomfortable to carry something that big for me. Now, if you're a bigger guy, maybe that works for you. Really, for all of these, you want to go to a local gun store and get your hands on them and see in person what they feel like. But for the really big guys, on the off chance you see this, Ryan, you're probably a Glock 19 kind of guy. Worth briefly mentioning Glock model numbers. Glock was originally not a firearm company. They made shovels and curtain hanger rods and things like that before moving to firearms. So Glock models below 17, 1 to 16, were not firearms. Every time Glock came out with a new invention, they incremented the number by 1. So when they initially came out with the Glock 17, that was a full-size pistol intended for police. They made a full-auto version called the Glock 18. Then they made a more compact version called the Glock 19. Then they made a 40 caliber version, that was the Glock 20. And then they did 21 and 22 and 23, etc. So the model number just indicates when in this process, over the course of about 40 years that people have been making Glock pistols, when that particular model originally came out. So you kind of just have to memorize the numbers, and once again, go to a store and get your hands on these and see. I think the Glock 19 is probably what most people recommend. Personally, I find these too big. I think most people who recommend these don't actually carry them every day. Some may, but unless you're a big guy, this is not it. My buddy Ryan, who's 6'6", 6'5", something like that. Basically, he's as wide and as tall as a door frame. Yeah, he can probably do a holster like this and pistol that big without problem. Now, what I would recommend to people is it's the Glock Model 26, which I don't have an example of here, or the Glock Model 43X. What the Glock 26 is they basically took the 19 and they made it shorter, so it would and you basically have enough room for two fingers and your pinkies hanging off, so this end piece is not there. And they also made it shorter, so it comes to about here. It's just a smaller gun, lighter, easier to carry version of this. The other thing I would recommend, and this is probably what I recommend for most people, including Adriel if you're watching, is the Glock 43. The Glock 43X. This normally comes in black. As you can see, this one's pink. This is my wife's. It's got the same length of this as, if I pull them side by side, you can see the grip lengths are about the same, so you can still get all of your fingers on it, but they made it significantly thinner. So if you stack those, you'll see that the pink one, 43X, is thinner than the 19. If you're sticking this in an inside the waistband holster or pretty much anywhere else, having that thinner frame here, and the slide's thinner too, but that thinner gun, even though it's only, and this is about an inch, that's about 1 1/3 inches. So we're talking about 1/3 of an inch difference between these two, but it makes a huge difference for actually being able to comfortably carry this. It'll fit in a holster much easier. But for most people, this is probably what I would recommend. One other thing that's worth considering, and this is mine, is the Glock 43. This came out slightly before the 43X. And the difference here is, be a little careful with these. Line them up. You can see the 43X is just a hair longer, and it is just a tiny, tiny bit wider. You probably can't even tell on camera. It is 0.06 of an inch wider, so 0.06 inches wider at the widest point for the 43X. The reason I would recommend the 43X over the 43 from most people is the 43X will hold more bullets. This will hold 10 rounds. The 43 holds 6. So it's 6 to 10. You're basically getting a significant increase in capacity. And we'll talk more about the importance of capacity in a future video on anatomy. So those are generally what you want to look for. I carry a 43 most of the time in a pocket holster. For that case, the shorter grip really does help, but once again, for shooting it, my pinky doesn't actually fit there, but you can get an extended magazine. Let's go show that on video. Empty magazine for safety purposes. On the 43, extends it a little longer and gives you something for your pinky to grab onto. As you can see, there's enough extra space. The 43X doesn't need that, and you just have a longer grip with more bullets in it. If I was going to go buy them again myself, I'd probably pick up a 43X. I bought the 43 before the 43X was available, and frankly, it doesn't matter enough to me to buy another, drop $500-600 on a pistol to get the 43X when I already have a 43. Now, in terms of where you should buy these, I would highly recommend you go to galleryofguns.com. This is not sponsored. I don't have any business relationship with them. If they'd like to sponsor it and give me a discount, unless I don't have the money to buy any more guns. So. But anyways, my recommendation for where to purchase your firearms is to go to galleryofguns.com, and you can search in there for a very specific model of gun. Like if you want a 4th generation Glock 19 that was manufactured in Austria instead of being manufactured in Smyrna, Georgia, the U.S. Glock plant. You want one that's manufactured overseas. You can go find that on Gallery of Guns, order through that, and they will ship. You basically pay like 20-30% down, usually a couple $100, and they will ship it to your local gun store. And you go to your local gun store, and they'll call you when it's available. And you basically go to the local store, pay the rest of the fee, fill out the background check paperwork, whatever legal requirements are in your state. Every state you have to fill out a federal form 4473, and they'll phone in the background check. But anyways, you order from Gallery Guns, they ship it to your local dealer. You go to your local dealer, pay them the rest of the money, and pick it up. And that will generally give you a lot more flexibility. Like in this case, when I wanted a Glock 43X and it had to be in pink, well, Gallery of Guns had them in pink. So that's the place I would recommend ordering from. Now, I would absolutely go to your local store and handle these. Like before you buy, get your hands on it, see how it fits in your hands. And you might discover, we're going to use the Smith & Wesson because I've got so much experience with these, that with the Smith & Wesson, hitting that magazine release with my thumb is really hard, and I've got to break my grip, but I can hit it with my finger. Like I can just wrap that finger around and hit the magazine release. I can't do that with any other pistol, but I found it works really well for fast mag changes on Smith & Wesson M&P. So you really need to just kind of go figure out what gun you want, what fits in your hand. Bigger guns are easier to shoot, they hold more rounds, but bigger guns is they're heavier and they're less convenient to carry. And if the gun isn't something you can carry with you every time you leave the house, what's the point in having it? It's not going to be useful for you when you actually need it.